Coming up on UGTV, Standing Committee meetings of the Unified Government of Wyandotte County, Kansas City, Kansas. A meeting of the Neighborhood and Community Development Standing Committee. This will be followed by a meeting of the Economic Development and Finance Standing Committee.
chairs back there that we're going to go ahead and get started. So we would like to welcome everyone to this meeting of the Neighborhood and Community Development Standing Committee. I'd like to remind you that public comment is welcome on any item that is on the committee agenda this evening. Anyone who wishes to make a comment on any item should be recognized by myself or another member of the committee. And then we'd ask that you come to the podium in the middle of the room. You'll have 5 minutes to make your comment. We do ask that anyone who talks during the meeting tonight, please speak as directly as you can into a microphone for broadcast and for recording purposes. Can we have roll call, please?
Roll call. Walters.
Here.
Murguia.
Here.
Townsend.
Here.
McKiernan.
Here.
Walker.
All right, our first order of business is approval of standing committee minutes from January 4th meeting.
Move for approval.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. The ayes have it. They are accepted as submitted, which brings us to item number 1 under measurable goals agenda, and that is from the Neighborhood Resource Center. Mr. Talcott.
Good evening. Thank you, Commissioners, for having me here tonight to give you some information from the Neighborhood Resource Center. 2015 accomplishments, and then 2016 things that we've got going on this year. In 2015, our one performance metric that we developed for the NRC was a 5% increase in overall code enforcement cases. We achieved that, and I'll show a graph here in a second, but a lot of how we achieved that was based upon some vehicle blitzes that we continued from 2014 into 2015. This was an item that was in the last community survey as a big item, and we have tools to address inoperable vehicles. We can tow them, take care of the problem where the issue doesn't just sit there. We also stepped up efforts for junk and trash and debris, doing more abatements. I'm going to go ahead and skip over this one. This is just by quarter. I'm going to, by year, we had approximately a 17% overall increase in cases for the Code Enforcement Office. You can see we had a total of 13,991. We had an increase in every quarter except for the last quarter, and we had a little bit of a decrease, and I contribute that to people trying to burn some of their additional time, that additional bonus pay and things along that line. It seems like we had a lot of staff out on vacation and stuff towards the end part of the year. In addition to the code enforcement efforts, I thought it would be good to also indicate that rental licensing is a partner in dealing with the code issues with rental property, and we had over a 20% increase in the number of inspections that they did in 2015. We have a lot of stuff going on. Some of the stuff is in the capital budget that was approved in the last budget process. We are updating our database from version 7.2, the most current version 7.3. We're doing this in preparation for the next bullet item. We're changing our environment from an Oracle environment to a SQL. This is an item that DOTS has been on us for a long time because they can't support Oracle anymore. So when we, several years back, we updated Oracle the best we could, and we've been operating on it, but now it's time. We're out of compliance. We need to switch to the SQL, which in the long run will save money, even though it's costing us for this conversion, because DOTS will be able to support this. They have the staff on board. And then the other thing that will help us here is that as we start to do more reports and retrieve data and use data more, everything DOTS does is in SQL Reports Writer, so we'll be converting all of our reports to SQL Reports Writer, which means that the data will transfer easier back and forth between databases. Also, we are in the process of trying to finalize the administrative fine process. The last item that we pretty much have is determining the hearing officer. Our plans are to kick this off during the latter part of April. We are anticipating moving a lot of our cases that go to municipal court towards the administrative process. This is one that we talked about a few times here. What it does for us is it allows us to reach out to those individuals that are out of town, do an administrative fine because we can't get them in municipal court, and then if it's not paid, we have the ability to move that to a special. I know we don't collect on a lot of specials, but I will tell you one of the best examples I have on this is that we had a subdivision out in the western part of our community, and the owner of the development lived in Texas, and the property had a lot of value, and basically told us, you go ahead and send me a summons, I'm not coming, I'm in Texas. There, we had property of value, it would have gotten paid, and we would have made an impression with them, so. We are also moving forward with, we've got committees meeting on developing a recommendation that will be brought to the governing body for the adoption of new codes and standards. We have been with the International Code Council standards for the last 10 to 15 years. The one thing that we're doing a little bit different here, though, those codes come out every 3 years. The most recent version is 2015. However, nobody in the metro area adopted the 2015 standards, and kind of a Core 4 initiative, but also trying to keep our codes and standards more equal across the metropolitan area. We've all decided to stay on the 2012. So we're going to adopt the 2012. We're currently under the 2009. And what that does for us, it brings us one step closer to being update, but it also gets us in compliance with that 6-year period for floodplain management. We are getting ready to start up inoperable vehicle enforcement efforts again. We had to stall that a little bit at the beginning of the year. Because of our update in Maui, we had to use a lot of staff to do testing, and we're still kind of doing that. We're pretty much through that phase, and starting this month, we will have our first vehicle blitz. We also are in the works of doing, to emphasize trash cleanup and QRTTs and abatements. For those, QRTTs, a quick response trash team. Those abatements are that stuff that sit out by the curb, things along that line where we can abate within 24 hours for the most part. Regular abatements take about a 10-day process, but that's trash on private property. We're also going to work towards bringing rental licensing staff back up to capacity. We have lost 2 of our inspectors here. Well, we've lost 1 at the moment. He took a position in community development, and then we also have one of our inspectors is getting ready to retire. Now, the last item, the last several items basically is to talk a little bit about the SOAR Summit. I believe you guys have heard some talk about this. It was an initiative by the Administrator's Office to bring a lot of departments together in an effort to try to address blight. I believe it's been a great effort, and we're moving forward. This whole process, in my eyes, one of the things I see is we will be using data more. We need to use, for instance, we've got to determine what those data points are, and that's one of, I believe, one of our next steps, but we need to use economical data. One of the things that Overland Park uses is the school data on free lunches. You know, that's just an example, using code enforcement, demolition, crime. There's a number of factors that we need to determine what our data factors will be to overlay these maps to find out where we strategically put our resources. What I mean by strategically, an example of that might be if we have an area that really everything's delinquent in taxes and they're all vacant, maybe the best strategy there is, for instance, just an example, turn that to green space or something along the line. Would it be worth sending code enforcement in there to address vacant property where we don't have owners to really hold accountable? Maybe it would be an economic development project too in that area, something along that line. I jumped a bullet here. Educate the UG departments in their role of addressing blight. As I stated, the SOAR Summit brought a lot of departments together, and I think a key here is a lot of departments do a lot of things and they really don't know the impact they have on blight. So I think by educating our other departments that this would be key in knowing that they do have an impact on things. Public Works and their improvements of streets actually has an impact on blight. The Delinquent Tax Office doing the tax sales has an impact on blight. So I think that's a key in moving that forward. The next step, from my understanding, is there are subcommittees that will be forming. One will be data to determine what data points we'll use to do our maps and graphs. Communication, one of the things that came out is that a lot of times other departments don't feel like there's proper communication going, you know, back and forth to actually help them understand what's going on and the impact they have. And then research. That group would be ones to look at best practices, things out there that other cities are doing, things along that line to discuss and see if they would fit for our community. That's it.
Well, excuse me, I would really like to applaud the administrator's office and all the departments who've gotten together so far, because I've come to learn over these years that no one department or even a couple of departments in isolation have the capacity to address these issues. And certainly, if we don't bring other departments into the picture trying to resolve these code tickets on the backside, doesn't matter how many you write, because if they're not getting resolved, then we still don't get where we want to go, which is the elimination of blight. And I'll give you one example of a house I just got an email on today. The owner lives in California. House has been vacant for 4 or 5 years now. It had a small fire in it a few years ago, but we put that out. The front door was open today, but bless his heart, the owner pays the taxes every year, and the owner pays the specials for us to cut his grass every year. Now, there's something wrong with that picture if by simply paying those taxes and paying those specials, that owner can keep control of a property that is creating blight and most likely danger for everyone in that neighborhood. And your department has done its job relative to that particular property in terms of citing it and abating it. And it's going to take a bigger effort than your department alone to do that. So I really appreciate the fact that the administrator's office has brought this all together. We have plenty of time for other comments, other questions, other discussion regarding this.
Well, I might just ask, so we didn't talk really about demolition. Is that not a part of this particular presentation?
It is. It could. I mean, we can answer questions. Actually, Erin Downing is here. She's the demolition coordinator. Had her attend if there's anything specific that she...
Well, maybe you could give us an overview of, are we on a plan to catch up on demolition, or to stop getting further behind on demolition, or just what is our goal for 2016?
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, Erin, but I believe we did get, last year, we got a little bit of an increase in funding. This year, we did not. There was a $1,000 special fund that was put in another area, but we did not get an increase this year.
Why don't we hand that microphone that's there at the corner, just hand it over to Erin so that you both have one.
We didn't get any increase in funds this year. There was an additional $100,000 that I thought we were going to get an increase, but it's no longer there in my budget.
It was the special fund that was put aside for a lot of the business development. It ended up in demo at first, but then it really wasn't the right location. It got moved back out. So it can be used for demo, but it would be at basically the economic development discretion to use it for demo for promotion of some type of business.
Well, so given that, what is your outlook for 2016? Are we going to make progress? Are we going to fall further behind? Are we going to tread water? Or as far as the number of houses we have on the list?
With
to
the
be
current
done?
funding, we're going to continue to fall further behind. How many did we take down last year? Was it like 50?
Like 62.
62. We took down 62, and we probably added. We have any idea how many we added last year?
I'm not sure. About 3 a week are getting referred.
So 3 a week would be 150
Yeah.
or so.
Yeah.
So we've essentially added 90 or 100 to the list to be demolished.
And that is, that really comes back to my point about stopping, about getting resolution of these code cases so that we stop that slide toward demolition. We've got to get on the front side of this, because on the back side, we're falling further and further and further behind. Erin and I just did some math, and we came up with take about $2.5 million to catch up on residential structures that are on the list today. Assuming no other structures came onto that list tomorrow, we'd spend $2.5 million to take down all the ones that are currently on the list. Not necessarily need to be demolished, just on the list, having been processed. So that's where I keep coming back to. We've got to put more resources on the front side of this and stop them from sliding toward demolition, if at all possible, so that we can we'll spend the same amount of money, but we'll protect our tax base and not lose all of these properties from taxable status, because we've lost the properties. And now, instead of a $30,000 structure, we've got a $1,000 vacant lot.
And is that the $100,000 that you're referring to, targeted toward identifying these properties that we can seize? For example, the one you gave an example of, it's current and it's taxes, but
Right.
it's not habitable.
But it's creating
But
blight.
it's creating a problem. We have the legal authority to do something about that outside of the tax sale process. Isn't that the $100,000 that we included in the 2016 budget to do exactly that?
The 100,000 was, like I said, that was an economic development. It can be used for demo, but it's for instance, if a business was gonna redevelop a site, a new business, they could use that money to tear down an old structure on the property. It's all based upon trying to promote economic development.
But I think Commissioner Walters is talking about not this money, but other money that would effectively seed a program where we could gain control of those abandoned structures that are not eligible for the tax sale. And that's where we end up in a lot of problems, is that this owner who's paying his taxes every year keeps that structure out of the tax sale, but it is absolutely creating blight on that. It's a corner lot, so it creates double the blight that it might be if it was buried in the middle of a block. And so we, my personal opinion, need to start exhausting what legal resources and means we have available to us. But some of those are going to require some seed money. So fair market value, for example, to be offered as part of a proceeding. And that is not that 100 that I'm aware of. Yes, ma'am.
So I would like to know which one of these goals that you have presented is actually going to start reducing the amount of blight in Wyandotte County?
Well, I definitely believe the impact that we've had for the inoperable vehicles has made it's been a success in that we've reduced a lot of those junk vehicles that are throughout our community. That's been the biggest impact that we've had.
Right, but moving forward, which one of these goals is going to help us reduce the overall blight in our community?
There's two things that I believe are going to be big. The administrative citation process is going to change a lot of the way that we do things. Once again, I think it'll reach out to some of those out-of-town people when they know that they're still going to get hit with this fine just because they don't come to court. And then, once again, by continuing to tackle the inoperable vehicles another year in a row, will make an impact.
Are there any other goals on here that are going to reduce blight in our community directly?
I believe there's going to be a lot that will continue to come out of the SOAR Summit when we figure out how we all can work together. On the code enforcement side, unfortunately, a lot of our problems is, as Commissioner McKiernan alluded to, when we don't have an owner to hold accountable, the only thing we can do is go through and do the minimal abatements that we have, and we don't have the hammers and the nails, and we don't do the rehab, nor do we necessarily want to do the rehab in a lot of instances.
So we currently, you're saying that we currently don't have the legal ability to address blight?
Well, we have a legal ability to address a lot of different types of blight. I mean, we have the demo program that we can get rid of a lot of the demo properties where we don't take ownership of that property, but we have a legal process that we go through to be able to raise that property. We are addressing inoperable vehicles once again, which is a big blighting factor and was a big issue in the community survey. We have the ability to abate trash on property if the owners don't take care of it, put that on as a special. We have a lot of ways of addressing a lot of the blighting conditions, but we don't have a solve-all for everything.
Well, I think we're a long ways from solving everything. I mean, there is a lot of issues to solve. It doesn't take but 5 minutes or a minute outside of City Hall here to drive around and see. You don't have to look for blight in Wyandotte County. It kind of jumps up and slaps you in the face when you're in your car east of 635 for 10 seconds or less. I've been here for a long time now, for 9 years, and this is a big issue for me because the #1 call I receive as an elected official is residents' concern with blight in our community. And I hear the same thing every year, actually, whenever we talk about this, that we just don't have the ability to address these issues. But frankly, I'm just not buying that because other communities don't have some of the issues that we have. So clearly, there has to be a way to develop a community that doesn't have the extent of blight that we do. So I'm very frustrated with that, beyond frustrated with that. And so every year for a long time, when I would hear these specific line items that were supposedly going to help us improve this situation, I would get hopeful, but actually on the ground, I would see no difference in our community. So if you're saying that, I don't know what else to do since nobody else seems to be asking the question, and I'm only one of 10. So I'm alarmed. I drive through, I think my district's better, frankly, and that's because of the hard work of the people that live there and their collaborative partnerships with me and working through the process that way. But I drive through other districts, and candidly, over the last 9 years, I've seen blight get worse instead of better. So I'm not sure we're moving in the right direction, and I'm not sure I'm okay with hearing that, well, we just can't do anything about it. I think there are ways, but since you're saying, for tonight's purposes, since you're saying that you believe the two primary ways to directly reduce blight in Wyandotte County would be the kickoff of the administrative fine process, I actually want to see benchmarks on where we're at today and how we're different 6 months from now, a year from now, another 6 months from then. I want to hear every 6 months at least how we're moving in the right direction with the administrative process, the administrative fine process, and how that's making a difference. Because I don't mean to be cynical, I have yet to see an idea that's making a difference. It just is what it is. So I want to see that. And then if this, I don't even know what this SOAR summit is, but there's always been a lot of talk around cleaning up blight and cleaning up Wyandotte County, but there's never any action. You hear it all the time. Nathan Barnes was here for 11 years, and I listened to him for a good portion of that talk about vacant lots and the overgrowth of vacant lots. And candidly, from the time I met him until he left, it didn't seem to get any better. So there wasn't really any success, I don't think, there. So with more conversation, because we've had a lot of conversation about this, is going to be the solution. I'd like to know again what the benchmark is on the SOAR summit, what we're expecting to get from that, and how it's actually going to change. I don't really want to set a standard of, I don't think the goals I'm looking for are, we have 2 employees, now we're going to have 4. I don't really care how many employees you have or your department has. What I care about is how the number of employees you've requested and you asked us to pay for are making a difference in the condition of our community. And I don't really care about the administrative fine process. I really don't. What I care about is how that process is going to make our county cleaner and have less blight and make it more marketable to the fair market so we can grow our tax base and bring in more revenue and make our county better for everyone. So I'm trying to be specific here so no one is guessing when they leave. And then again, educating UG departments, I see all this as administrative. Absolutely, we want to educate UG departments in their role in addressing blight. Again, I don't care how educated they are, I want them to address it. And I want to see how, with numbers, it's different from today than it's going to be, a month, 6 months, or a year from today. We throw out these sort of broad brush sorts of things, but we seem to have lost sight about making a difference in the actual blight of the community. So I just hope we can develop some real benchmarks that we can point to some real on-the-ground successes. I find it absolutely appalling, and it's just one story that Commissioner McKiernan talks repeatedly about these properties that have been up for 15, 20 years in his district, that we can't seem to figure out how to handle that in a more timely fashion before they ruin an entire neighborhood. So hopefully we can come up with some real solid goals that everyone can get and understand and everybody feels the difference in.
I could not agree more strongly with that, because in a lot of the neighborhoods, and I'll only speak for my district, in a lot of those neighborhoods, they could tip and go one of two ways. We could have a block that is full of tax-paying properties, or we could have a block that's full of vacant lots. But the one thing that I have learned in my shorter time here is how the problem is so much bigger than just the code enforcement department. And about how, as Commissioner Walters just said, there are some tools that could be used by us, legal tools, tax tools, that we may not be using. And it is time that we started to bring those tools to the table and use them to the full extent of our ability. But where code enforcement as a department only plays a part of the total role or the total effort in this. And it does have to be a coordinated effort, and I do think our assistant county administrators sitting here completely understand that and are working toward coordinating our departments toward a broader effort. Because I have said, and I will echo Commissioner Murguia again, I can't stand to lose too many more houses on my blocks. And I'll just say for everybody here, Aaron and I were talking about a house that recently burned down and will be demolished shortly at an expense to us. And that house was vacant for 4 years, and it was tax delinquent for 4 years, and we didn't move on that house for 4 years. And finally, the campfire that some transient built in it got out of control and burned it down. So the loss of that one house on that one block, and I went back and looked at the appraised values of all the parcels on that block 3 years ago and looked at those again today, and the appraised value of that block is down $75,000. And that's $1,500 of taxes, property taxes, that we can't collect because we can't even bill for it because the appraised value is no longer there. And if we take $1,500 of lost property taxes and multiply it by every block in my district, that's a black hole. It'll pull us all in. It'll have its own gravity, and we won't be able to get out. But I do appreciate the fact that it is a multi-departmental effort, and I am confident that we now have the direction and the, as Roy Williams used to say, the want to make this happen, because we cannot, as a county, afford not to make it happen. So any other comments or questions or discussion? Well, then I will just say I am confident that we as a group will begin to make the measurable progress that Commissioner Murguia mentioned. And I look forward to the report when we get it back, because it will be exciting.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That moves us into our committee agenda. Item number 1 on the committee agenda are a variety of land bank applications presented by Mr. Slaughter.
Good evening, Commissioners. Well, we have a full agenda for you today, so let's jump right in it. We have 7 applications. I'd like to break these into the first 2, and if there's any discussion on those, and then we can talk about the last 5. That is for 1412 and 1410 Freeman.
So you're asking for action on those 2 out of the 7, and then we'll consider the other 5 as a group.
Or if you want to
Okay.
do discussion and have action on all of them, it's whatever works for you guys.
Move to approve the first 2.
Second?
There's been a motion and a second to approve 1412 and 1410 Freeman. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Roll call, Walters.
Aye.
Regia.
Aye.
Townsend. McKiernan.
Aye.
Okay, and now we have the 5 applications brought back from, for Trinity Church, 407 Cleveland, 415 Greeley Avenue, 419 Greeley, 416 Quindaro, 428 Quindaro. They were asked, the church and the neighborhood group were asked to meet before we brought them back. And it should state in your packet that they met on Monday, February 15th. Also included on the packet should be the Land Bank Advisory Board comments. And I believe there's representatives here from the advisory board if you have any questions on that.
So these 5 parcels have come forward. They have been presented. Remind me here, what was the resolution of the Land Bank Advisory Committee in terms of recommending yes or no?
They recommend that these 5 do not go through to the full commission. And based on the fact that the addresses listed below were property that had been purchased by the church in previous years, and their belief or their view is that since the development hadn't started on those properties, then why would these 5 be considered?
Mr. Chairman, if representatives of the proponents are here for these properties, and if anyone who has a counter view to the application are here, I would like to hear from them.
Absolutely,
And
we
go
can.
from that. To go back, I think these applications were first appeared on the agenda back in August of last year. And both parties, the neighborhood group and the church, were asked to have it removed so they would have time to meet. So I guess they've met. So if both sides are here, then I think it would be beneficial to everybody to hear their respective positions.
All right, so what we'll ask is that anyone who wants to address the standing committee about these properties, I guess we're forming a line right here, so come to the podium. When you come to the podium, if you would please just state your name and your city of residence so that we have that for the record, and then I'll keep a timer here and you'll have your 3 minutes to make your presentation to the committee.
Roy Fowler, represent Trinity AME Church. I'm a resident of Kansas City, Missouri. The application before you is one that we presented to work to try to build new housing in the community that we're in. Our church has been at 5th and Greeley for 95 years. It is one of the oldest churches, and we have worked hard to maintain that. We had plans to build a new sanctuary, but because of the economic downturn, we had to put that off. That is part of why we had been looking at land in the neighborhood to try to help stabilize the neighborhood and build something on a lot of the vacant properties that are there. And because of the economic downturn, we've not been able to move as fast as we had planned to on building. What we wanted to do with some of these lots is build new housing on those lots to help build the rooftops in that community and families. And we're still planning to do that. That's what we were planning to do with those. We recognize that there are some members of our neighborhood association that have some issues with the speed that we've been moving at. But I'm sure you know all around the city things have had to slow down and they're just beginning to pick up again. So we're hoping that our application will be approved, and we'll continue to try to work with our neighborhood association, which I think is just beginning to become actionable in our community. Unfortunately, we haven't seen much in that regard over the past 10 years. but with Ms. Jefferson, we think things are going to come back around and we'll begin to work together. So, and with me is our pastor, and unfortunately Reverend Carey, who was the initiator of these actions. She's in California at a conference. She's been moved, and Reverend Stephen Cousin is our new pastor. So we're going through some organizational changes, but we're still focused on the same things that we had been talking about.
And all of this is being done in an effort to increase the tax base in the area, to make the community more attractive, so that people can come in, be a part of it. And it's my prayer that they would join Trinity AME Church.
Thank you so much. Yes, ma'am.
So, Chris, why is the advisory committee care if they take 5 years to develop what they say they're gonna? Is there a long line of people clamoring to buy these lots? I mean, what's the issue?
I mean, we haven't received any other applications for these properties,
Ever?
ever.
And how long has ever been? How long have they been available?
Well, I've been here since '08, so.
Okay, so do you know, well,
Their
so why
cons-
does it matter if they own
I
them?
believe, simply put, their concern is that the deeds that we deeded over there had some time frames in them. Those time frames have passed, and yet the property is still in their possession. And my position has always been that if they're in a property acclimation mode, it doesn't make sense to go back and get the property out. And then if they come back and say, we're ready now, we have to go through this again. So that's been the position I've taken up there, and I believe that some or all of the advisory board just have issues with that.
And I think this goes back to this discussion we've had before. If somebody wants to acquire property for the purpose of future economic development, they're cutting the grass and they're paying the taxes, and until and unless somebody else comes along with an imminent proposal and the funding to execute same, then we're actually ahead of the game to have, assuming they do cut the grass and pay the taxes, we're ahead of the game than if we held them ourselves. If we held them, we could move faster if somebody came and said, hey, I've got a proposal, but we would have all the holding costs associated with those properties.
So, Chris, along with what Commissioner McKiernan said, so I'm left to draw no other conclusion because no one else is coming forward, is that?
Oh, I'm sorry, I did not see anybody else stand up.
Oh.
Anyone else who would like to speak to the standing committee about these parcels? Probably.
Good evening, commissioners and staff, the standing committee. My name is Elnora Jefferson, and I live in Kansas City, Kansas. I am the current president of Oak Grove Neighborhood Association. And I'm here to talk about the lots that Trinity just mentioned, the ones that are listed here for sale. And frankly, I've been looking at this situation for quite some time, our neighborhood has. And it's been a complicated situation. Basically, to answer perhaps Commissioner Murguia's question about what difference does it make, it's because there are policies and procedures that the land bank has followed. Gee whiz, for the 10 years that I've come to standing committee meeting and looked at minutes and so forth and so on. For example, any buildable lot construction has to start within a particular time frame. Neighborhood involvement, the neighborhood groups are supposed to be involved in that, just to ensure compatibility, and also to make sure that the individual collective goals are together in one thing and another. Unfortunately, what has happened here with Trinity goes beyond, or it's greater than what we see here on the 5 lots. There are some transactions that occurred 5 or 6 years ago that, as far as I can reason, violated UG policy and procedures. For example, the Holt area. We have Holt areas, not new. We've had Holt areas on Tremont, Peregrine, Falcon, and so forth and so on. Some of the property that Trinity has acquired and should have been in a TIF hold area, and that that constraint was violated, and they were allowed to get that property. Now, as Commissioner Murguia says, these properties are, as Chris has said, these properties have been vacant for some time, but what is unknown, and I want to surmise, just because maybe the different departments or those who have charge of these properties have not yet come together. I think they're coming together, but had not come together to find out what the left hand and the right hand are doing. Some of those properties of which we had our urban farm. And it was an urban farm more in, not just in name, but actually in production. We had a production, we had a distribution, we had a marketing arm. We sold our produce at Briarcliff up at the Great Acres. We had something really going on. We had the economic stimulus program that was brought in by President Obama. I don't know of any other neighborhood group who hired youth in that area. Not only did we hire them, we went around and we actually got the applications from the parents, and that was a request by then Mayor Reardon to use the economic stimulus money in order to hire youth. Once those lands were sold to Trinity in violation of just that policy, and there were others, then we were forced to kill our operation, and we have not yet gotten back on footing on that. The other thing is that we've had, the neighborhood itself has plans for a community center and a learning center. When we first heard about Trinity, the overarching desire from Trinity was to actually expand on the church. So the property that it bought some 10 to 15 years was for that purpose, and that's quite understandable. We respect our urban churches, and without them, quite frankly, we would have less visibility of people and traffic than what we have today. That changed somewhere in the process to where now they are talking about families. Well, and that makes sense too, because a lot of people want to earn income. Now, in the urban churches, at least in the urban churches in my area, there are very few people who actually live in the area that attend the church there. Most of the people will leave after church services or after a day of the church and live elsewhere. Once they're gone, then that leaves behind those of us who live there who have to deal with the effects of crime or the effects of, and unfortunately I mentioned that first.
Ms. Jefferson, if I may interrupt, I'm so sorry, but I know we do have a time limit on the public speakers.
We do, and I just made a decision here to shut my timer off because she's giving some background that's pertinent to this story, so I decided to give her additional time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Commissioner McKiernan. Most of the people leave, and so those of us who are there have and continue to work with drug cultures, with thank goodness not drive-by shootings, but we do have shootings that occur and other unacceptable behaviors and so forth. So what I'm asking, I can say all of this, and there is a lot of background information, particularly Commissioner McKiernan, you had said at one time early on that we never want to do again what we did do in order to cause the blight in any particular area. And Oak Grove is a neighborhood like so many other neighborhoods that are registered with the Livable Neighborhood Association, but we're not on parity. We're not on parity with the neighborhoods that are on Piper. We're not on parity in a lot of the neighborhoods that may be elsewhere, as in District 3. So what causes that lack of parity, those inequities, are many different things, whether it's favoritism or whether it's just an adherence to policy and procedure. So what I'd like to suggest from a neighborhood perspective, and I don't know what my neighborhood members are going to say, I think they will agree, is that what we'd like to do, rather than just wholesale award these lots to Trinity, we would like to ask you, the commissioners, to help us develop a wholesale, a holistic, a frontal approach whereby we can work together, assign a developer. We have Bob Hughes who's on the periphery there, in order to build a plan whereby we can add those types of things, housing, retail, and so forth, that will improve the education in that area, improve the employment in that area, and allow all of us to be successful rather than just one particular entity.
Okay.
I have some other things, but I know that I have already extended my time. I think I'll just end with this. Back in the 1950s, I had asked Tom Scott of this of the Housing Authority, how it occurred that we had as many public housing entities as what we have. And this is not a slam or anything on public housing, so, and I'm sure you understand that. But it does have something to do with the level of discretionary spending. It has something to do with the richness of the tax base. In the 1950s, quite a bit of our area in Oak Grove was given over to public housing. So the types of families that Trinity or anybody else is looking to build in our neighborhood are important, because that's the way we can attract something greater than, or perhaps better than, maybe, always save butter, if you will. So thank you very much.
Ms. Jefferson, thank you so much. If there are other people who do want to address the committee, with that background having been given, I am going to stick strictly with the 3-minute time limit.
Thank you. My name is Rachel Jefferson. I am the Executive Director of the Historic Northeast Midtown Association, a member of Oak Grove Neighborhood Association, also a member of the Land Bank Advisory Board. I live in Kansas City, Kansas. I am here to speak to you today about these Trinity lots because, as Ms. Jefferson before me said, there seems to be a tendency to not follow policy, perhaps because it may be easier not to. In 2009, the church applied for several properties that they received for a church expansion, which was supposed to start in 2009, according to their application. In 2011, 2012, they received several other properties for extension of church, a new school, playground, and parking lot, and that construction was supposed to start in 2013 and had not started. These new applications in 2015 still have the church expansion, parking, playground, but now they've added new homes and duplexes as well and a school, and they're supposed to start in 2017. There seems to be a history of selling lots to this particular entity without ever coming back to see if they're going to actually develop on them. It would be one thing if they were paying taxes, but they're a church, so therefore they don't. I would also like to say that the Neighborhood Association has been active for a long time in the area and been watching the sale of these properties for a long time as well, wondering what was going to happen, if anything. We've asked for some type of development plan from Mr. Slaughter, and we're not provided with one. And at our most recent meeting that was referred to on February the 15th, we asked the church to please explain to us what their plan was. And the answer we received from Mr. Roy Fowler, who previously spoke, is we have no plan. When we asked what type of housing they would build, whether it be duplex, single family, or senior, they did not have an answer. When asked how many homes they would build, they did not have an answer. When asked if it would be low income, mixed income, no answer. When asked if there was a developer, no answer, but the church said that they themselves were not a development corporation.
You have 1 minute, ma'am.
Which to me was odd because looking in past deeds, the property that was recently bought by Trinity AME from the tax sale was bought under Trinity AME Development Corporation. And I have not found any record of that being registered with the state. So there seems to be some conflicting information there as well. When some of our neighborhood association members asked for a time frame, we weren't provided with one. We asked, if you were to start one house today, how long would it take? No answer. So it just seems that instead of continuing to sell property to an organization which undoubtedly has the good intentions to stabilize the neighborhood, but no real plan or financing in place to do so, I would say that that doesn't really support neighborhood development. It might actually just make it harder in the end for someone who really does want to come in and develop, and then they have to go and buy piecemeal.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
That's time. Anyone else in attendance here tonight who'd like to address the standing committee on this issue? Yes, sir.
Good evening, commissioners. Excuse me, staff. Chuck Slutler, I office at 726 Armstrong Avenue, Kansas City, Kansas. I'm part of the, a new part of the Land Bank Advisory Board, and from my perspective, the concern of policy, whatever that states, if 20 years are allowed, then policy should be adhered to. If policy dictates whatever that does. So I would encourage, as a new member of this advisory board, that the commission establish appropriate guidelines, et cetera, so that everyone involved knows exactly what the expectations are. These kinds of hearings can be based on those, and that those policies can be adhered to. Obviously, commissioners, you can make a decision regardless of what the land bank might suggest or advise. We understand that. But again, from my perspective, being a new member of this advisory board, if whatever entity does not follow its own policies and procedures, they enter into, at best, possibly unstable ground, if not dangerous ground. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else who'd like to address the standing committee? So at this point, sir, if you would please give your name and your city of residence for the record, and you'll have 3 minutes.
John Bailey, and resident of Kansas City, Kansas, and also a member of Oak Grove. I'm not up here to continue that line of thing. I just have questions because I'm new to all this thinking about land bank and whatnot. And I noticed the word intention using a couple of times. And I'd like a concrete definition of intention, because I've had intentions to travel around the world for a couple of years, but without money and tickets, then intentions are dreams. You know what I mean? So when we met with Trinity and we asked for the plan to the layout of type of housing, type of buildings, time frame, they had intentions to do that. But they were like me with my around the world trip. They didn't distinguish the intention from the dream. They didn't show the concrete steps. They didn't have something on paper that we could read. We were very, very excited about the meeting because we hadn't been having meetings with the organization that was gobbling up properties like Pac-Man. But we still don't have that distinction. So if we could get that if I could get that definition that distinguishes an intention from a dream and what steps go to actually have production, like Ms. Margia was saying, I think that'd be clarity for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Townsend.
Thank you. In light of some of the comments that we've heard, I'd like to ask the representatives from Trinity if they would like to respond to any of the concerns expressed with regard to plans, contacts they may have since had with developers or plans or anything, so we can circle around and have the fullest appreciation for what's been said here tonight.
Thank you. Roy Fowler again. To clarify one point regarding the community garden, after Trinity became owners of those lots, Ms. Jefferson was told that they could continue to use that property for their community garden with nothing else other than they're using it. Apparently she did not choose to do that, so I just wanted to make that clear. It wasn't that we put them off. Reverend Carey went and spent some time with Ms. Jefferson and told her that they could continue to use it with no charges. We have been talking to, we have an architect that is working with us on looking at the properties that we have and what the possible types of housing that can go on those. We've been talking with a builder also, Habitat. They have many designs of homes and they do contract building. So we've been talking with groups regarding developing the properties that we have and those that we were looking to acquire. So it's not that this is just a pipe dream. But I think everybody knows what our economy has gone through. We're trying to recover as a church. We own a school, Kitty College. We've had to sink a lot of money into that school because of downturns in enrollment. So we are working in the community as it relates to the funds that we have, but it's limited. And our ability to move forward with our development as it relates to our neighborhood, it has been halted for a while, and we're getting that moving again. So I'm sorry that I can't control, or we can't control, the economy of our city and our community, but we're doing the best that we can.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Townsend?
Well, Mr. Fowler, or Reverend Cousins, if you could address this, has there been more of a specific time frame discussed? Since you said you've met with Habitat, you've retained an architect, have there been any time frame?
We're hopeful
discussed?
that we'll have some concrete plans within the next 6 months. We were reluctant to give the neighborhood association a date because, I mean, it was kind of like an inquisition, the meeting that we had, unfortunately. But we didn't feel comfortable in sharing that at that time. We're going to work on our relationship with the neighborhood association. It's clear that it's not what it needs to be. We're hoping that we'll get that done.
Commissioner Murguia?
Thanks. So can I ask Ms. Jefferson a couple of questions?
Sure.
Okay, Ms. Jefferson, can I ask you, can you come back to the podium so I can ask you a couple of questions about this? So, I apologize for making you repeat, but your history on this situation is real detailed. And since I haven't been involved in that, I just have a couple of clarity questions.
Sure.
Okay. So, you made the comment that your neighborhood association had a program, irrelevant what it is, but you had a nice program for the community and which was utilizing this ground. Is that accurate?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. And other grounds as well, Commissioner McGarry. We had approached the UG prior to your being on this particular committee for some lots. And so it was this particular area, and then we also had a plan for other lots. In order to offset the cost to the UG of cutting and maintaining the lots, we were going to work on a community garden, an urban garden, and so forth, which now is a real popular idea.
Okay. So you also currently working on these lots, and you also have an idea to grow and expand what you're trying to do in that area of the community,
Correct.
Okay. And so, so I'm going to have to make some assumptions here to get to cut to the chase. So is what is upsetting you and causing this disagreement the fact that you and your organization, who are mostly local, have hopes and dreams for that area as well? And though you don't have any necessarily concrete plans, would it be fair to say that neither does the other organization? And it appears to you and your organization, for the most part, that by allowing this organization to proceed and not yours, that is the issue of fairness.
That's a good question. It's kind of a difficult question as well. Let me go back and say we did have plans. We do have plans. In fact, I own some adjacent land to that farm area. One of the plans included tilapia farm and also a solar greenhouse. And we've invested and had people come in from out of town to actually look at those plans and present renderings and drawings of that. After the land was sold to Trinity, where again it was in a TIF and no land was supposed to be sold out of the TIF unless the developer of record approved that, then we got rid of our plans. We went no further because of the shadowing from solar and some other complications.
So let me break it down further then. So you and your organization also have plans which you believe are credible plans for this property.
For a lot of the property, correct.
Okay, and so just hold it right there. And then it strikes me, see if this fits you, it strikes me that you feel as though your group has not been treated with the same level of respect as the church group.
Correct, Commissioner. We were told that the Land Bank Management Department was told to do whatever it needed to do in order to satisfy Trinity. And that was not what was told to us.
So that is what you were alluding to in your comments about fairness and equity.
Correct.
Okay, so I close with this comment. I'm only one member on this committee, but as an actively involved member, I'll say what I've said many times over again. I now have a clearer understanding of what your position is and why you're taking that position, and your other comments. As the 3rd District Commissioner, though, I will tell you my politics are that I tend to defer to the commissioner that is in charge of that district. I feel like that commissioner is entitled to that level of respect. So that you know why I vote the way I vote, it's because I have great respect for my peers on the commission, and I want to be supportive of their leadership. So I just want you to understand that.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner.
Commissioner Townsend?
Thank you. Well, I just want to thank all the parties here tonight, because even though they may have differing views, it does show that they are passionately concerned about what happens in the area. The other thing I wish to say, and I've said this before, under similar circumstances, I am a member of Trinity. However, that's all I am, in that I do not hold any position in the church as an officer, a trustee, nor do I hold any position of fiduciary responsibility in the church, and I have no substantial financial interest in it. I posed a question to legal counsel as to whether I could vote tonight given the disclosure, and was told that my vote would be needed for a quorum, so I will be voting tonight. Having said that, I think this is a good example of the discussion we heard previously about eradication of blight and trying to improve neighborhoods. I am distressed to think that policies were not followed, but I don't think it's been entirely made clear that that pertained to, if it happened, previous councils and previous administration, and the policies were followed as far as I have been apprised for these particular lots. In fact, to make sure that all parties were treated equally, we did ask to have this matter deferred back in August, and I asked the parties to get together way back then and try to meet with each other, and if they could come to an agreement, fine. I know that's not always possible. So I think with regard to these particular properties, whatever else happened in the past, when maybe none of us were even here, that everybody has been dealt fairly and equally. One of the things that we have in District 1 that many people have seen as a disadvantage, but I'm seeing it as an advantage for things to come, is open property. We've got a lot of property. So there is, in my opinion, enough space for Trinity to go forward with the plans that they have, as well as for the neighborhood organization to have plenty of places to grow, to have their flowers, vegetables, whatever they want to grow. We have got plenty of land. The issue tonight is why the application for these particular parcels should not be granted. I have not heard a good reason not to grant that tonight. I've heard about things that may have happened in the past, and we're all here committed to make sure that that does not continue. I can't say that we've had that happen with these particular ones or any that since we've been on here. That's the real issue. And I have heard representatives from the church say that they really want to engage with the neighborhood group from here on. I think this is a good procedure for that, or an opportunity for that. So I am not hearing any reason here tonight not to grant this application. There is plenty of property that needs good parenting out of the land bank for all of those who want to do something positive. You heard Commissioner Murguia talk about blight, and you heard Commissioner McKiernan say that code enforcement is just one small aspect of it. Here's another aspect of it. If we can get responsible owners to come forward and take these properties out of the land bank, then that's what should happen, in my opinion. So, that's my position on it. And I would move that these applications submitted by Trinity for these particular lots be approved.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to approve the applications as submitted. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Roll call, Walters.
Aye.
Murguia.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye. Mr. Slaughter, that takes us to our next group of applications.
Thank you. Next, we have the next 25 delinquent.
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve as submitted. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Roll call, Walters.
Aye.
Murguia.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
McKiernan.
So Commissioner McKiernan, I was
Ah.
just mentioning to Commissioner McKiernan, sometimes we move fast on these land bank applications, but if there's someone, we should have done this before
Yeah.
roll call, but I don't think there's
If
anyone here
anyone
to
has
comment.
any comments on this particular
Was
batch
there-
of transfers,
Was there anybody here to
we should
comment
invite
on
those.
that?
Absolutely.
And we're trying to get better about asking that before we rush through it, but, so, sometimes we're not perfect.
That brings us then.
Next, we have 3 properties that are being asked to transfer from the land bank. We have 633 and 635 Linda Lane to the city of Bonner, and 616 and 616H South Valley Street to the District 500 School District.
Move for approval?
Second.
Been a motion and a second. Is there any discussion here at the table or anyone who wishes to make comment on these particular properties? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Roll call, Walters. Murguia.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye.
Last thing
final
we have is some donations.
Move for approval.
Second.
I did have a presentation.
Okay.
Just, if you don't mind.
Don't mind.
Because I think it brings a good question to some of the past discussions we've had about why do we accept certain properties for donations? Do we have a criteria? I apologize, there is actually also going to be 1045 Webster Avenue is also a request too, so. The main part of this presentation will be about 284 South Coy. Here's an aerial of the view. Just want to point out some of the other anchors here in the neighborhood. Central Middle School, the City View at St. Margaret's project. We have a church. We have 2 Catholic school buildings. We have some development of homes by CHWC. And right over here to the south of St. Margaret's is 284 South Coy. Also just wanted to show you some of our land bank is in the red and tax sale eligible is in gold. And there's our old Whittier School over there too. This is a little bit of a closer shot of the property in question. As you can see, it's just a little bit west of St. Margaret's Park, but it's this little sliver right in there. When we receive a donation request, we contact the delinquent real estate abstractors. They generate an O&E report. That basically gives us information as listed there. Who's our current owner? Is there any mortgages still out on the property? Are there any liens, whether they're local or federal? What kind of real estate taxes, special assessments are still outstanding? If there are issues, particularly with those 4, we will send a letter to the applicant stating that at this time we probably don't think it's a good fit. We would probably advise them to look into the tax sale where the judicial foreclosure process will pretty much take care of those issues there. If there's no issues, then that's generally what's led me to bring this to you guys for approval. Tell you a little bit about the requested property. The current owner is U.S. Bank. There is no mortgage, no liens. It's about $12,500. That does include a demo. It's a small lot, 25 by 126. It's appraised at $320. And there was a last code case in September of last year. So normally, we would probably look at the two houses to the side and say, is this somebody we could target? Is this, maybe go after them to say, hey, maybe this will help your recommendation, as we've already talked to one of them and they're interested in the property. So the first one is 282. This is to the north, similar size and lot. It is a house. It's appraised at a little bit over $30,000. Hasn't been a recent code case, but as you see, it is tax delinquent, $1,400. It's not eligible for a tax sale until September this year, but they would not be eligible to apply for the property. The one to the south, 286, similar size lot, a little bit less in value. The code case was recent. They are tax sale eligible with over $4,600 owed. And again, because of the code violations, taxes, they run the risk of being ineligible. So here's a picture from the street of 284, and as you can see, it's right here. This house, as you can see, has been stickered, it's boarded up. Let's go ahead and assume that this person wouldn't be responded to any land bank inquiries about purchasing it. And again, this is the house here that come September 1, if taxes aren't caught up, will be eligible for a tax sale. Policy, we can turn around and accept donations for private entities. And again, one of the questions I had is, even though it's not the most attractive property out there, do we take the burden off our delinquent real estate, and this would be one less property they have to work up into an upcoming tax sale? Do we only consider it if maybe we can get our hands on that abandoned property, and now we got two properties that may be a little bit more attractive to a developer or someone with rehab capabilities? And again, if we don't, who will? Who's gonna help the neighborhood out? So, again, the other property we had a request for is 1045 Webster. That's this one here. 1047 is also owned by the same applicant, but that property's already made it in through a tax sale and will be in the May sale. So we got a request for that too, but in talking with the abstractors and delinquent real estate, we just figured it's already going to be in the tax sale. It's over $18,500. Nobody's going to bid on that, so we're going to get it. So that's why we don't have that request. But again, the other request tonight is for that property right there. And just some information about that: no mortgage, no liens. The one we're requesting for tonight is over almost 14,000. Both lots are pretty similar, so both of them, once we have, would be roughly about 60 by 130. This is appraised at about 500, and again, the other property's in the tax sale. So that's the presentation. I'll entertain any questions or
Commissioner McGee.
Yeah, so Chris, I just want to tell you, fantastic job, and I would request that this presentation go on the commission agenda for presentation, and you don't let us step over it. This is probably the best example. I know you're here about land bank, but to me, this is the best example of the challenges of economic development in challenged urban neighborhoods. This is a testament to that. And so if for no other reason, I think it will be helpful to the full commission to view this. It's a very short presentation. It's very to the point and very easy to understand. So that's just my only comment, and I again would move for approval.
And I'll just echo, I'm very familiar with that property on South Coy, and given the abandoned house to the south of that property, there's a high likelihood that we are going to end up as the owners of that property. And as owners of both properties, we then have a better sale package at somewhere down the road, and a little bit higher likelihood of getting someone who will come in and improve the properties and keep them current. So I certainly endorse this. Commissioner Townsend, do you have a, okay. No. Then in that case, there has been a motion and a second to accept these transfers. Any further discussion? Any comment from the public? Roll call, please.
Roll call: Walters.
Aye.
Regia.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye.
Thank you. That's all I
And
have.
that is it. Mr. Slaughter, thank you very much. Item number 2 on the committee agenda tonight is a presentation regarding contract for deed, and that's Mr. Hague is with us tonight.
Good evening, Commissioners. I was just asked to put together a short presentation regarding contract for deeds and how they interact with our code enforcement. So I just have some very basic information regarding what contracts for deeds are and how they interact with code enforcement. Okay, so quick definition of what contract for deed is. It's a land installment sales contract, basically a monthly payment made directly to the seller for purchasing of the property. A seller finance mortgage, basically under Kansas law, whenever you have a contract for deed, the seller, while he or she is the holder of the legal title, it's really a mortgage or a security interest on the property for that they can foreclose on if the contract is breached by either failure to pay or any other potential contract provision. What it's not is not rent to own, which is to say it's not a renter landlord situation. The buyer is the equitable owner under Kansas law, so that if there are any issues with the property while the property is under contract for deed, the buyer is the appropriate party to address any sort of codes issues. Contract for deed does not stop UG from enforcing the code. Again, it's been indicated to me there might be some confusion regarding who the party is responsible for any maintenance of the property while it's under contract for deed, and it would be the buyer occupier of the property, which would be my second point. And then again, as to reiterate, the buyer does become the equitable owner of the property, and the seller again just has a security interest in the property. The seller, using the contract for deed, must file equitable interest or the contract for deed with the register of deeds. Basically, in code enforcement, if we have a property that has a citation regarding failure to meet up to the code, if they do their check for who the owner is, and if it shows that the property is still owned by someone who is not the current occupier, they'll cite both the occupier and the owner. And if that owner is indeed the seller in a contract for deed situation, then in order to be removed from the code enforcement case, they need to come to codes court, show that the contract for deed has been registered with the Register of Deeds or the equitable statement of equitable interest. Rental licensing obviously does not apply, given the fact that, again, it's not a landlord-renter relationship. It's a buyer-seller relationship, with, again, the buyer being the owner under Kansas law. And with it not being part of the rental licensing, we don't have the right of entry in contract for deed properties the way you would if it were a renter-landlord situation. And so that if we needed to get entry, we'd have to go through the more typical warrant issue to again get access to the property. And just kind of an FYI, there's a House bill right now in Topeka that's looking that may restrict our right of entry for the rental licensing, which would again put the burden on the unified government to get a warrant before they're able to enter the property, even in a rental licensing situation, versus the more free right to enter at this time. That's all I have. If I have any questions, I can answer them.
Well, the questions that I have, there probably aren't answers to, but I'm going to ask them anyway. So if I put air quotes around buyers, and I ask how many buyers know that they are not actually renting?
Yeah, I mean, all I can say is that as an instrument in order to sell property in Kansas, It is a recognized instrument, but you're right. I mean, anytime you have a contract situation, you have differing levels of sophistication. I mean, it's certainly possible that a person might sign on to one of these and not realize what they actually have is a mortgage.
Right.
So that if they breach the contract, you know, it's not they don't bring an action for eviction as if they're a tenant. They actually have to foreclose on the mortgage, which would put it, which is a very different process, obviously.
So that brings up my second question. If we had to guess how many contract for deeds are out there versus how many actually get filed with the Register of Deeds. And
Yeah.
I understand that's calling for speculation, but I'll tell you, my gut says it's more than a few.
Well, and all I can say is that, you know, whenever, at least as far as code enforcement goes, as I stated during the presentation, that, you know, if we have a citation, you know, both the occupier and the legal owner will be cited, and at least that is one way to drag them into court. And if they want to get out from underneath responsibility for the maintenance, then we put the onus on them to get the proper paperwork filed in order to get out from underneath that citation.
Here's another interesting question. Have we ever audited our records in the Register of Deeds office to see if the same property comes up month after month, year after year, with a new contract for deed executed more often than we would expect a mortgage to be executed? I mean, does the same property have a new contract for deed written on it, and then 12 months later have a new contract for deed written on it to a different person?
We have not done that, no. Not that
I
I'm
think
aware
it'd
of
be
anyway.
fascinating to do that and see what the results would suggest. Final question for you, because I know some other commissioners have questions as well. At one point, and my memory may be a little bit hazy on this, but I do believe we had a gentleman who was the buyer in a contract for deed situation who applied for some emergency home repair money through community development from CDBG, and as I recall, was denied that money. Is there, and so one of the things that I'd like some more clarification on is that since the seller has only a mortgage interest left in this, shouldn't all the rights of ownership, and that is the right to qualify for emergency home repair dollars, transfer to the buyer? Shouldn't that person have the same rights as anyone who's buying a house from a mortgage company? And in this particular case, it seems to me that this, quote, buyer was not afforded the same right or privilege or opportunity, whatever it might be, as someone who was buying through a mortgage company or a bank.
I think that's an interesting question. I'd say, you know, under Kansas law, there probably shouldn't be a distinction made between whether you have a traditional mortgage versus a contract for deed. I mean, the law is very clear. I mean, the buyer
Okay.
is the owner, and it's not a question that is more or less up for debate. I mean, and again, the law is clear that if the seller wants to foreclose on that mortgage because they want to take back the property, I mean, they have to do that through the courts.
Okay.
And that will have access to the contract and what have you. So, I mean, without knowing any more about what you're commenting on, I'd say I don't see at least a legal reason in order to draw a distinction.
Well,
there.
then I'm most likely misremembering that. So, Commissioner Murguia, I think you had.
Yeah, I have a question. Is a contract for deed legal if it's not filed with the clerk's office?
Yeah, I don't see any reason why it would not be. Now, it wouldn't shift. I think it's registered. It's filed with Register of Deeds primarily to shift the burden of code enforcement maintenance to the buyer, so that the seller more or less doesn't get citations for a property that they sold. But as far as in terms of the state of Kansas law, there's no regulation regarding contract for deed in order to perfect it, if you will, through any specific mechanism by filing it with a local government or the state government. I mean, there's nothing to keep me from selling a property I have to a private to a buyer and having that be a good contract for deed. Now, as long as I'm willing as the seller to accept, you know, code enforcement responsibilities for whatever reason I may want to do that.
So, just for clarity, so you're saying no, I mean, it's still a legitimate contract for deed even if they don't file with the clerk's office?
Yes.
Okay. So, in the situation of a code enforcement, when, if there's nothing at the Register of Deeds office that says, it's contract for deed, then we would send the code violation notice to the person that occupies the home or the owner, or no, we would send the notice to the owner of the property, correct?
Ideally, we would send them to both parties. If we're aware that there's an owner that's not actually living in the property and it's not rental, and we don't have, and by our records it's not a rental property, ideally we would send the citation to both the occupying party and the seller if they haven't properly filed it, and then the best way to clear up that citation would be for both parties to come to codes court and explain to the court what the relationship is to the property. The party who is ultimately responsible, the citation will be left in their name, and then the other party would be dismissed from the action.
Okay, so your answers are very good, but since I think there's some general public that wants to understand it, I think we might want to use a real example. So, Mr. Talkin, since you're here, can you answer some general questions about what's happening right now? Since we don't have that data, and if you don't have it, we can talk about it later. But so, for example, what are you seeing from the actual boots on the ground code enforcement perspective? Are you seeing a number of contract for deeds that are not being filed at the filed with the unified government, or are you seeing yes, they are being filed? First, answer that part of the question.
Oh, there are a number of them that are not filed. When we become aware of that, it is another, because we have adopted an ordinance that said it's a violation. That is our local ordinance. We do add that on as a violation to the summons.
Okay, so despite what the state law says, it is a violation of our local ordinance that if someone has a contract for deed on their property and they don't file it with our Register of Deeds, they're in violation of that.
Yes.
Okay, so tell me what happens in real life. So somebody has a code violation on their house that is buying contract for deed. You would send that, if there was no contract for deed at the Register of Deeds office, then you would contact the owner of that property, or do you contact, as he suggested, both the tenant and the owner?
We try to contact both the tenant and the owner.
So what happens most often in a situation like that?
Eventually, I believe they usually file the contract for deed.
But who responds? Do you get a response from the actual holder of the contract for deed? Do you get a response from them?
That varies. I mean, just because we send them a summons or a notice doesn't mean they're gonna respond.
So when they don't respond and there's no contract for deed filed, you hold the tenant accountable, correct?
It's correct. Let me back up. A lot of times we get complaints about properties that is believed to be rental. Rental licensing goes out and then investigates, and that's where we a lot of times find out the contract for deed is in place. Hasn't been filed.
How do you usually find that out?
Because we get complaints a lot of times about properties being rental and.
No. How do you, who tells you that the property's contract for deed? How do you get proof that it's a
From the
contract
owner,
for deed?
generally the owner of the property.
The owner of the property?
The seller, let's put it that way.
The seller, that's a
Yes.
better way to put it, right? So the seller is usually steps forward and says, this is contract for
Yes.
deed.
Yes, because they want out of it.
Right. And so at that point, do we hold the tenant of the property responsible?
Well, they are now the owner of the property now that we have a contract for deed, so yes.
Okay, so it gets the contract for deed the seller out of any trouble for a rental license, but it holds I'll call him the buyer then, in that situation, accountable for the condition of the property.
Yes.
And are you seeing a number of those buyers as being unaware that they're a buyer?
Yes,
You see that often.
yes. A lot of the individuals feel like they signed a rental agreement, not a contract for deed.
And that happens frequently.
Yes.
And so, So what is our legal recourse? How do we handle that situation today?
Well, the key that we've keyed in on is education. We developed a series of videos that are online for those people that are doing contract for deeds about the right things to do and to make sure that they understand what they're getting into. Otherwise, really, it's a legal issue between the other two, other than we're gonna have to hold who we believe or find out to be the owner. Those are the ones we're gonna hold accountable. Now, like Ryan said, is that we generally try to summons them both, and a lot of times, then it's up to the judge to decide who she's going to dismiss in that case and who she's not.
Is there a particular demographic that's being most affected by this deception, or is it based on economics instead of demographics?
You know, I don't have enough data. I will tell you the ones that I become aware of more has to do with the Hispanic population, seems like.
So is the video that's online
Yes.
bilingual?
The contract for deed is, though. Yeah. We have the contract for deed is bilingual. The tenant video is not.
So the educational tool that we're using to reach the largest percentage of people that you believe are affected by this may not be able for them to understand.
Correct.
Yeah, that's probably not gonna work then. Okay.
But what you just said gets back to the question I asked earlier. How many people out there actually signed a contract for deed and thought they signed a rental agreement? And in my experience, it's more than we really want to think about. So let me set up a hypothetical. So a contract for deed gets executed. The buyer now gets served with a code notice, and in the process of investigating that code notice, discovers that there is some fundamental flaw with the property, like the foundation is unstable, and that house is basically not inhabitable. What happens then?
We still pursue the owner to take care of the problem.
So the owner being the buyer now to take care of the problem. So if that owner who thought he was renting says, well, I can't take care of that problem, then he gets foreclosed on and shown the door. Would that be correct? If the seller says, no, you signed a contract for deed and you either take care of that problem or I'm going to foreclose on you.
If there's a big enough problem, they probably wouldn't foreclose. They don't want to take the burden.
But what if they foreclose and throw that person out and take their down payment and then just do the same thing all over again?
That's happened.
Yeah, I know it's happened because I'm making it a hypothetical, but I have, and my point about all of this is, and to kind of piggyback on what Commissioner Murguia has said, I think we really need to find a way, and I don't know what it is, but we need to find a way to get more on top of this, to discover to better ability than we have today the number of contracts for deed that are getting executed where people are not aware that they're actually in a buying situation. They think they're in a renting situation. They think they have a landlord who will in fact take care of those fundamental structural issues that they are unaware of have become their own responsibility. And that's where I ask now, how many times does a single property turn over in the system? How many times is a new contract filed? So, well, anyway, Commissioner Townsend.
Thank you. Let me just think out loud about this. We've heard that in these contract for deed situations, the buyer becomes really the equitable owner. And as such, they will be cited for any code violations, and possibly the person who also sold the property until a decision can be made. But from what I'm understanding tonight, basically the buyer becomes the new owner and they will be held accountable for code violations.
That's correct.
All right. What I would like to see investigated through legal is whether or not an ordinance can be put into effect that would make it incumbent upon the seller to make sure in that contract for deed, there is a statement that clearly says that the buyer at the execution of that contract becomes the owner. And as such, they will be responsible for any repairs, code violations, etc. Is that not something we would have the ability to do?
Well, I totally endorse that, but I think, aren't we making an assumption that that actually gets read before it gets signed?
Well,
Here,
what can
it's
we
just a
do? I mean, I didn't get a magic wand with the job. But in looking at what can we do, if we have the wherewithal to try to initiate and put through ordinances and put that out there, because what it would do would also give these uninformed, the uninitiated, the unfortunate new owners a way out. Because what we're hearing, and I've heard this in my district as well, that these types of contracts work a hardship on those who are not as well educated, those who are not as economically advantaged, and as you say, many times they think they're just entering into a rental agreement and not appreciating the full weight and scope of the responsibility that also comes with that. So to the extent that that's something we can do, I would like to see that looked into. Can't solve everything, but I mean, that might be one step.
So this gets to what I commented earlier on in regard to the actual goals with benchmarks and standards. So I, like Commissioner Townsend, have a couple of suggestions. Obviously, I think we need to immediately get the video translated into Spanish, since I'm assuming the primary language is Spanish, and those, at least most affected, are Spanish speakers. The other potential solution is to reach out to those not-for-profit and for-profit organizations within our community that work directly with the Spanish-speaking population, and maybe have home buyer education programs. I know that CHWC does that. I know El Centro does that. And provide that video to those organizations for free so that they can educate the population that they serve. But another option, I do like where Commissioner Townsend was headed, but I think what we have to do first, and especially since obviously government can't be everything to everybody, I just happen to know about this because I've been intrigued by this opportunity for years and have never had the opportunity to tap into it. I can't remember the name of it, but I'll get it to our staff. There is a federal grant, a United States federal grant through the U.S. District Attorney's Office. It's something about the Byrne, B-Y-R-N-E Foundation, and they're what's called social justice grants. And it's a very large grant for a multi-year term. It would be ideal for Commissioner McKiernan and Commissioner Townsend's district. I have some, but I don't have as many Spanish speaking. Most of my constituents are either bilingual or speak English. But my point is that this social justice grant will pay to hire a highly educated law firm to represent these economically disadvantaged people, to represent them in cases like this. And then on the back end, they work with local governments to implement policy that allows us to go after the actual party that is causing the problem. So without spending our money on it, we're able to spend this money to do all the legwork to figure out who really is the problem in that particular situation, and then actually take action in the right way and not just take action. So I can help someone with that if they call me. In fact, I think that grant opportunity is coming up this year if somebody wants to apply within the unified government. But it's true, it's clearly, Commissioner Townsend, in my opinion, a social justice issue, and it's just typical poor people being taken advantage of. And I don't think our local government has the capacity to fix that, but we surely can help a local not-for-profit apply for some money that can hire a law firm that's capable of helping us address this issue. That's mine.
Excellent. Thank you.
Note that the FDIC also does a lot of work in this area, and that certainly the social justice component of it is something that they're charged with working with local banks on. The confusion, I think, is if you're thinking you're entering into a rental, you wouldn't know to be looking to get homeowner assistance. So I think that's where the social justice piece is really critical, is people not knowing what they're getting into.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, one more thing. I just wanted to get some more clarification about a particular aspect of, another aspect of these contract for deeds that Mr. Hager talked about. If you have a contract for deeds situation and let's say a neighbor calls in and says the owner occupier has more dogs or cats, I'm just making something up, than is allowed by ordinance. You said that there's some restriction or any other type of code enforcement. If you're on a contract for deed situation, code enforcement cannot enter. I'm just trying to get at, again, clarification about the limitations for going into a house.
Yeah, they could, at least not in the way they can currently anyway, with a rental property. It'd be, in order to investigate that type of situation, ideally we'd have to, if we couldn't get permission to enter the premises, we would actually have to go and get a search warrant based on reasonable suspicion and or probable cause, I should say, regarding the possible violation and what have you. This is the way we're entering anyone else's property to look for a potential criminal matter, like having multiple too many dogs or cats.
Okay. What about a property that's not under contract for deed? Let's say let's say somebody calls and says she's got too many dogs and cats in there. I'm not on a contract for deed. Would there be, what is the procedure just to come in?
Again, they basically have to search for, get a criminal search warrant in order to enter your property.
Okay.
I mean, that's the primary point of this presentation, is that at least under Kansas law, despite the abuses, the buyer is the owner of the property, and the seller is not a landlord. He is, more or less a bank with a mortgage interest that if the contract is breached, he has to foreclose on and not evict them. So,
thank you.
Mr. Hager, we thank you for your presentation, and I think everybody here has heard some concerns that we have about potential abuses that could and should be investigated and addressed in the future. So we very much appreciate the information.
Just a clarification on the CDBG concern that was thrown out there. My understanding, and I'll confirm this, but is that the federal law looks at ownership differently than perhaps our state law does. I don't know that there's a conflict there as much as if CDBG is going to be putting money into it, they want to know there's clear ownership of the property.
Well, and as I said, I may have misremembered the particulars of
I don't
that.
think you misremembered it at all,
Okay.
in fact, but I do believe there's a distinction when using federal dollars, and I can't give you the federal code of that yet at this point, but I'll go find it because I do think there's a difference.
Excellent. Thank you. All right, that brings us to the end of our agenda for neighborhood and community development. Once again, Mr. Higa, thank you very much.
thank you.
Neighborhood and community development is adjourned. We will take 5 minutes and then reconvene as economic development and finance. That'll be at 6:57 by my clock. Economic Development and Finance Standing Committee. Public comment is welcome on any item that is on the committee agenda tonight. Any member of the public who wishes to make a comment on any item should be recognized by myself or another member of the committee. Then come to the podium in the middle of the room. You'll have 3 minutes to make your comments. Once again, we do ask anyone who is speaking, either from the public or from the committee or from the staff, to speak as directly into a microphone as possible for broadcast and for recording purposes. Roll call, please.
Okay, roll call. We do have Mary Gonzalez sitting in for David Albee.
Present.
Walters.
Here.
Murguia.
Here.
Townsend.
Here.
Walker. McKiernan.
Here. Our first item of business, well, first of all, we did get an update to our agenda which just had some additional information on item 2. But our first item of business is to approve the committee minutes from January 4th, 2016.
Move for approval.
Second?
There's a motion and a second to approve as submitted. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Ayes have it. Those are approved as submitted. That takes us to our committee agenda. Item number 1 is a report on fourth quarter budget to actual.
Good evening, Commissioners. It's my pleasure to be here one final time.
Rats.
Anyways, with me this evening, we have our full financial team: Reginald Lindsay, Budget Manager; Debbie Johnsher, Assistant Finance Director; and Kathleen Von Atchen, incoming CFO. And so we have several items on the agenda, and we'll move forward with those. The first item that you mentioned, our fourth quarter budget to actual report, and I'm just going to touch on a few of the highlights. This Thursday evening, the staff will be presenting a more detailed summary of that information. But I'll say this for Kathleen, that this report's a report we prepare on a quarterly basis. We generally submit it to this committee one month earlier than we did on this one. We did wait an additional month on this presentation to allow for some annual accounting entries that were done, so we would have a more accurate picture of year-end performance. I'm going to direct you to the first page that you have in your packet, and hopefully it's a multicolored page that shows revenues and expenditures by fund. I just want to touch on a few of the key numbers on this page. Going down the left-hand column of the page, we have the various funds that comprise our budget. The first column shows beginning fund balance, or how the end of year 2014 occurred, and then we have columns for budgeted and actual revenues for 2015 and similar numbers for 2016. From an overall perspective, we had I'm going to characterize a very good year for 2015. For the general funds and the 3 funds that comprise the general fund, the city and county general fund, as well as the consolidated parks, our ending fund balance moved from $7.3 million to $20.8 million, so a $13.5 million gain in fund balance. We knew we were going to have a gain or an increase due to that one-time Sporting Kansas City land payment of $9.5 million, but revenues were generally over budget and expenditures below budget. Commissioner McKiernan actually raised a question, and he looked at, I'll say, the very first line item, and we see general fund budgeted revenues at $151.5 million and the actual at $140.9. Gives the appearance of actually revenues being below budget, but I might remind you of, in that line item, we budget an annual appropriation expense of in excess of $12 million that was not needed from either the revenue or the expenditure side, meaning the bonds that were had sufficient revenues to cover those expenses, and neither the revenue or expense was required. If we go down to the line that says total UG tax levy funds, the actual increase for all those funds was a total of 14.6 million. And then if we go, I'll say all the way to the bottom of the page, we see for all funds that comprise the budget, we had an increase of nearly 20 million in our ending fund balance. So overall, we saw increases across all funds. I think it's due in part that or at least our objective is to budget revenues conservatively, as well as and take this similar approach with expenditures, meaning that we hopefully we're budgeting at a higher level of expenditure than what actuals are. The following pages go into detail on for the general fund, both revenues and expenditures. I'm not going to cover those at this time. If you have any questions, Reginald's here to respond to it, but this Thursday evening staff will look at that information in greater detail.
Well, if I, and to go back to the point that I brought up about the annual appropriation debt revenues, if you go down to the consolidated general, so the second page, not the colored sheet, there's $12 million there budgeted, which is not realized, which makes it, and correct me if I'm wrong, but makes it look as if revenues did not come in, but in fact real revenues, those monies that we actually collect, if you back out that 12 million, we're at about 101% of budget rather than 96%. And then further on down, if you take that away from expenses, we're actually under budget on expenses, whereas the report itself makes it look like we're over. So the report looks like we're under on income, over on expense, but when you take out that 12 million, it's actually very slightly the reverse of that. Would that be correct?
Correct.
And so I have to say, when I first looked at this and I saw we were at 96% of budget for income, and I went, how? Because every number looks like it met budget until I got to that 12. So I would encourage you to bring that out, that if you just look at the percentages, it doesn't tell the actual picture of what actually happened. So.
This particular item's for information only and no actions required.
Right, but it paints what at first looks like a much worse picture than we have in terms of cash, in terms of actual revenue and actual expenses.
It's an excellent point.
Okay. Any other comments or questions on this particular item? All right then. So that's it for item number 1 on the agenda, correct?
Yes.
All right. That takes us then to item number 2, which is a resolution regarding the 2016 Master Equipment Lease Purchase Agreement.
Thank you, Commissioner. This item was the one that you received the additional information. At the time that the agenda went out, we didn't have all the documents ready, so we held them until we had everything ready last week. This is a resolution authorizing an amendment to our master lease agreement. This is the master lease agreement is the agreement that we use to fund all of our equipment that's in the CMIP that's identified as lease finance. This is amendment number 2 of the agreement. It extends the agreement to December 31st, 2016. It has a maximum amount not to exceed $7 million, and all the items listed in the schedule were approved in the budget as part of the CMIP. I did just want to make one clarification. In your documents, there are 2 schedules of equipment in there. I meant to only include one of them. They're the same schedule. One of them just includes a little bit more detail regarding estimated interest rates that are required on the approved schedule. So did just want to make that clarification. But it's the same amount of equipment.
Where's that estimated interest rate number?
It's on the schedule that's marked. It should be on the final page. It's marked Annex 2.
What is the interest on that $7 million?
Well, what happens is when we fund a schedule, if we have a piece of fire equipment, or let's just say a police car, that we're gonna fund as a 3-year piece of equipment. In our master lease agreement, there's a formula using the Treasury interest rate swap. And so for the estimate that I did as of February 19th, that rate was 0.92%. So if I had funded something on that date, that would have been the interest rate. Once we get ready to fund a schedule, they usually lock in an interest rate approximately 5 days prior to us setting the schedule. So this list just gives you an estimate of what the interest rates were at the date that I prepared the schedule.
And without me looking, what was that?
On
The date that you prepared the schedule?
February 19th.
But, no, what was the interest rate
Oh,
on the
point-
date in which you prepared the schedule?
For the 3-year schedule, it was 0.92%.
Thank you.
The highest one on there is 1.6.
That's what I was curious about. Sorry, I was
Yeah.
asking.
Yeah,
you.
10 years.
That would have been the 10-year schedule.
Fantastic, okay.
Any questions, any discussion? The request for action is to approve the resolution.
I move for approval.
Second?
There's been a motion and a second to approve the resolution as submitted. Any further discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Roll call, Gonzalez. Walters.
Aye.
Regia.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye. That brings us to item number 3, which is an ordinance terminating the Adams Street, Kansas Avenue redevelopment district.
This is a TIF district, and the word terminates somewhat of a misnomer. This is a successful TIF project, and the project plan was approved in 2006. We actually issued debt for this project of approximately $837,000. That included principal and interest. The project's located in Armourdale. It is an industrial project. It was developed by the Wilhite family, and you might be familiar. They've developed a number of buildings in Armourdale. A highly successful project. We're able to close this TIF approximately 10 years early, and then the property will be returned to the tax roll. On an annual basis, it will generate revenue of approximately $81,000. Again, that would be shared among all taxing entities. And so the action before you is to proceed with the ordinance that would terminate this TIF.
Or successfully conclude, if we want to phrase it another way.
Correct.
I move for approval.
Second?
So motion and a second to approve as submitted. Any further discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Roll call, Gonzalez. Aye. Walters.
Aye.
Regia.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye. There being no further business before us, yes, ma'am.
Since this is the last standing committee for Mr. Levin, I just wanted to say what a pleasure it's been to work with you and the rest of your staff who will still be here. But you've always made things succinct, and I know I've appreciated that, and I'm sure that was helpful to those people who are watching. So you answered the question, and that is very much appreciated simplistically as possible. So good luck to you in your new life phase, but you will be missed.
Well said.
I'd like to echo the same thing, and know with the financing that we've done with the BPU, Mr. Levin has been more than helpful for all of our commissioners and our staff, and I appreciate that for our entity as well.
Thank you.
And we're undoubtedly going to have cupcakes or something before you leave, aren't we? Oh, he's not giving it away. All right. I think we all echo what Commissioner Townsend said. And with that, there being no further business before us, we are adjourned.